All right, how's that? That might be a good place to put that. We'll see if some people come along. Let's try to set this up so people can see what's going on a little bit better. About like that. All right. There we go. All right, so this is this one, right? And this is this one. Welcome back. I'm just marking these, putting some numbers on them in case I get them mixed up. 9.5, 8, 7, X and X. Okay. Just making sure I didn't cut them out wrong. Welcome to the live channel. I don't know who you are, but welcome. We're just getting ready to cut a little bit of glass. I got a few more of these tiny feathers to cut out, and we'll be in good shape. It won't take long to get through the rest of this bird. And so the eagle will be completed today. And there's a lot left to do in this project. It's a big project, just on account of how many pieces there are. But it's actually going to be pretty simple once I get there. Because the rest of it, after the eagle and the lettering, everything else is straight lines. And I'm going to show y'all an interesting way to manage and deal with and handle cutting a lot of straight lines in a studio setup. Haha, that's all right, pushing buttons. Always glad you're here, man. Always glad you're here. Right now, and you know, after cutting this red glass out, my silver magic marker was so dull, I had to use a black magic marker on that dark red glass, and I could hardly see the lines I was marking. And so that should be a lot easier today. So this glass here, we're cutting the black part of the eagle and this pattern back here behind us. And now I could just put the piece of glass over it and cut through it. But like I said yesterday, I really prefer to draw the pattern piece onto the glass. It's the most accurate depiction, because that 1/8 inch of glass underneath, if you're just trying to trace around, you know, if you ever done any archery fishing, when you're pointing your arrows down into the water at a fish, you got to aim below it, because of the distortion of the water makes it appear higher up than it actually is. And so you'll get the same distortion with a piece of glass, even though it's only 1/8 of an inch. And the other reason is, with my eyesight issues, I can feel along the edge of that paper. And the paper's delicate enough that if I bend it in any kind of way, I can feel that in my fingertips, and I can start and stop over. So that's a big, huge, long explanation of why. You know, because I've worked in studios where people just put the paper down and roll the cutting wheel right next to the piece of paper and cut their patterns out and do just fine. I don't like that method. Number one, I don't like getting cutting oil on my pattern pieces because it ruins the edges in case I have to cut a new one later. And I don't like getting little paper and lint inside my cutting wheel and gumming up the works where the oil is supposed to flow from. So there's a whole lot of explanation. The only other explanation about my approach here right now is that this piece of glass here is also going to be the lettering at the bottom where it says a. And so I need to be careful cutting these little tiny feathers out. I should probably cut the letters out and then cut these feathers out of the scraps. But I'm quite certain that I have plenty of glass to do both sections with some scraps left over. So I'm not clenching up or clutching my pearls about it, but I am being very careful about my wastefulness and how I cut glass. Hello, Christian Buckle. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Glad you're here. Always glad you come along. So, let's get a few minutes. We'll draw a couple of these on here. And like I said, the main goal for today is to finish cutting all the glass for the eagle. And once we're done with these feathers, we will have obtained that. So, and I left them, I didn't cut them completely out of the pattern pieces because as you can see, they're quite small. And so when I'm dealing with something this small and this finicky, I will do it in a different set of processes because otherwise I have hundreds of little pieces like this laying around everywhere, and it can just be a real strain. So when it comes to really finicky stuff, I will cut the patterns as I go. And to me, you know, this is a home studio. I'm not on anybody's schedule. I'm in no hurry. I have the complete freedom to enjoy the process. And, you know, somebody that's worked in professional studios, and I've even been the boss, I've even been the shop supervisor. And it's always, how fast can you cut the glass? How fast can you get it done? How fast, how fast, how fast? And that's all fine and good for making money. But that's when you realize after 2 years of apprenticeship and following people around and learning everything you can, that if you go to work for a professional studio, they're going to rush you so fast that you're not going to enjoy the process. And so that's where I'm at in life. I enjoy the process. And let's see, I need to make sure I didn't cut that one already. Let's see, this is, hold on. It looks like it's backwards to me. Something wrong with that there, but we'll come back and check it. So now I'm just checking to make sure that this is that one, because I guess this is just a ghost piece. I have no idea. It's not part of the pattern. I don't know where it came from. It's bothering me. It's not any of those two. All right, we'll set it aside just in case we need it. But we'll go ahead and draw the rest of these pattern pieces on here and move on. I'm pretty sure it was the space between the feathers. I don't think it was an important piece. It didn't have a number on it. But, you know, the shape of it had me bothered a little bit. And then I'll have to cut at the very end. There's a little doodad of a hooky of a shape at the end of that feather, and I just went ahead and cut it off because it is so tiny. I mean, it's less than half the size of my thumb, and so I'll just turn that into another scrap piece and set it off to the side. It is about to storm. It's all muggy and windy and dark. It looks like something's trying to move in on us. Alright, that's number 3. Number 3. And then 1, 2, 3. Okay, then there's 2 more in this section. And they're pretty tiny. I could have just used some scraps. I bet I could. I probably should. But like I said, I have plenty of letters left over. Or plenty of black left over to do those letters. And I even have an extra piece of gray laying around in my scraps. So I'll be alright. But there are some tiny boogers. Yeah, those scraps are too small. It's just not worth it. And then I'm making sure I keep all these pattern pieces together in case I drop one on the floor or something like that. Okay, there is that wing. So, you were late? Nope, you're right on time. What am I trying to make? Christian, welcome back. I'll show you. So, this is basically a reproduction of my niece's son, my great nephew. This is his jersey when he played basketball for Eastern Washington University. And what we're making right now, we're doing the pattern pieces for these little tiny wing tips is what we're getting ready to cut out, the feather part. And got quite a good start on it. We've got the cross in the middle and we've got the eagle cut. And right now, like I said, I'm working on the wing part. I still got to do these next and we'll be done with the eagle. So my nephew, Angelo Allegri, and this is all a mosaic stained glass is what it is. I'm sorry if you didn't realize that. So my nephew, Angelo Allegri, pretty big deal in our family. He played for Eastern Washington University. They went to the championships. And then he went to the Charlotte Hornets in the summertime B League and played there, did real well. Then he went over to Germany and played on the team there, did real well. And so now he's back in the States. But for his mom's birthday, I'm building this stained glass mosaic piece for her. You know, it's just something fun to do. And so what I'm doing here, I just traced all those pattern pieces. So now I have all those pattern pieces traced on with as little as scrap glass left over. Now I know I have plenty of glass left because I'm going to do the nameplate in this color also. So I'm being very stingy and very careful with my scraps and how much waste, you know, because when you cut glass you can only cut so deep and so wide without having breakaway lines. And so you have to kind of plan for where your scraps are going to go when you lay another pattern piece next to it. You know, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And like I said, I'm not in a real big hurry. I want a nice window, not a fast window. And this gray glass has, it's so crazy, I'll show you, hold on. Whoa, oh my eyes are bad. Alright, so if you look real close, this gray glass, see those little pits and seed spots in there? It's got a wavy texture on the back, but on the front, on the smooth side, it's got these little tiny pits that my cutting wheel on my glass cutter keeps falling into. It's a real pain in the butt. It's about the equivalent of rolling your glass cutter off the edge. It dulls your glass cutter down. So I try to avoid that. And so, I mean, we're cutting really, you see this here? It's about to get even smaller. So when you've got really small, and it depends, we might be able to break it out of there. So if you have a hard time getting a leverage and you want to kind of slowly bend down and pull away, you can lay it on the edge of a table and press downward with your thumb, and then you're able to get in there and get that piece. You got to get your grossing pliers in just the right spot, and so I mean, I'm cutting, that's what we took out of it, and I have an even smaller pair of these pliers to get, and so now I have that smallest feather for the wing. And once I get all this glass cut, I'll go around the edges of all that. Golden, how are you? Welcome. Oh, thank you, Golden Sai. You're awesome. Everybody say hi to Golden Sai as she comes and stops by to say hi. She's a wonderful lady. I'm coming right along, Golden. We're cutting the wings of the eagle out today, and then we'll have this whole eagle done. So, moving on to the next piece. This is a big, long curve. And so, what you want to do when you're cutting big, deep curves out like that, you want to cut the curved side first so that you have some backbone so that the break in the glass doesn't go right through your shape. So you have to really think about which part you're going to cut first and which parts that you really need to be more careful with. So I've scored the other side, but I'm not going to break out the other side because, like I said, I wanted that backbone for a little bit of support. Excellent, excellent. Welcome. I'm so glad you guys are here. You guys are so supportive. So this is kind of a fragile piece, and it's a bit of a deep curve, but I believe that we can snap it out of there. And just snap it all out of there in one piece like a professional glass cutter. So now I can go back, and this line is already scored, but now it's easier to take the piece out. Actually, what I want to do here is I want to make a little relief score, and that'll help it break off easier. See, like that. So I made a little relief score so I could go back and finish my way around the curve. Right on, stick around, glad you're here. Welcome, welcome. I'll talk your ears off if you sit and listen. By the time I'm done cutting all this glass, you'll know about everything there is to know about an easy approach to cutting glass, and even in dealing with some real technical issues. No two windows are ever the same. Okay, that looks decent. So, and then you want to keep this clean because now we've only cut a few pieces, but I guarantee you there are little tiny pieces of glass that you cannot see on this table. And you want to be sweeping and clearing as often as possible. And a lot of amateurs in the beginning, when they learn how to work with glass, you have a natural tendency to want to brush the table. Well, that's how you get glass bits all over the back of your hand. So always stop frequently when you're cutting glass. And I like to cut glass on a sheet of paper because the lightness of it brightens it up, you know, and it helps keep the table, you know, helps with the life of the table, you know. And then every time you take a break, you lubricate your cutting wheel with a little bit of oil in there. And we're ready to continue. And there's only 5 pieces on this wing. We'll cut these last 2 out. One at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you build a stained glass window? Well, the first thing you gotta do is you gotta kill an elephant, you gotta eat that, and then if you're still wanting to build a stained glass window, I suggest hunting tigers because it's probably easier. Right on, Golden Side. But I could cut glass. I've spent my entire life in my favorite jobs in several different stained glass studios in America, working in the shop and working on scaffoldings, you know, rebuilding old antique church windows. I love every aspect of this trade, you know, and after 25 years of cutting glass, you could get little points like that too. Let's see, so that doesn't seem right though. I think we could probably recut that one and make it longer if we wanted to. I might recut that one. It looked like it was a little short. But any recuts will happen later after I make sure I get those letters cut out. That'll be the more important because I have another gray that I can use that's not textured that I plan on using for some little highlights here and there. Nice. And then some of these tips, you know, all of this will have to be ground on a grinder to get rid of some of the sharp hickey cup edges and whatnot. So like pieces like this, and it's just a nice little pointed tip that I've left squared off. I'll hit that last little bit with a grinder because I don't want to break this little thin part. So that, okay, I got those backwards. This is that one. That looks better. All right, one more for this wing, and this wing is done. We're almost there. And if the pieces are big enough, you could just break them off with your hands. You know, you're gonna get a few glass cuts here and there, no matter what you do. But you're not gonna get a lot of glass cuts if you scored it properly and you're breaking it away properly. You don't have a problem. But you will not find a glazer that does not have Band-Aids in his toolbox. I guarantee you. You ain't a real glass guy unless you got Band-Aids at the bottom of your toolbox and you're praying to God that you never need them. That's the life of a stained glass artist. Band-Aids and duct tape is our surgical tools. Uh, I've seen some people get hurt pretty bad cutting glass. When you work in the industry and you're carrying big giant sheets of glass through the studio. Um, Dennis 5. I'm not sure, but welcome. Oh, thank you so much, Christina. I think Christiana. Oh, always being careful, always being careful. You guys are so awesome. Thank you for stopping by today. We're almost done cutting this wing out. That could have been done a half hour ago if that guy in that shirt cutting glass would shut up. So, and anytime if you hear that snap off there, anytime that you're having a little trouble at the beginning of breaking the glass away, and you want to set it down flat, and you're not just pushing down, you're not breaking glass, bending it over, you're slowly separating it more like a piece of mozzarella cheese that's hardened over and you're trying to not break it. So it's a bit of a touch and feel, but most people won't work with pieces this small. I get real down and dirty with it because it's a mosaic pattern. I want it to have hundreds of pieces of glass in there. Oh, wow, Christiana, thank you so much. You guys are so nice. That's so special to hear that. I'm an old man that lives alone. You don't have no idea how much that means to me. So, now, I'll show you where we're at so far, but don't get alarmed. These pieces don't exactly fit perfectly. That's just the first step. We've got them cut out. So we've got our first wing done. We've got the cross in the middle cut out. We've got our letters cut out. We've got our eagle is all cut out. All I have left to do on the eagle now is the claws and this last row of feathers that we're getting ready to jump on next. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for stopping by again. Thank you so much. Come by anytime. My goal is to live stream the entire process of building this window and explaining everything as I go. So tune in anytime, and over the next couple weeks, you'll see a big, beautiful window, and then we'll all say happy birthday to my niece. So awesome. I'm glad you stopped by. Okay. So we'll repeat the process. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more feathers, and we'll be done with that set there. Cut these out. And I am just using regular scissors because there's such a large gap in between the feathers that I don't need my pattern shears to figure out the spacing to make allowances for my grout lines. So I'm able to cut a little bit more accurately with the real pair of scissors instead of being stuck with those pattern shears are clunky and hard to work with. Whoops. That's actually 2. So actually 7 more. I lied because one of those is actually 2 together. Okay. Which side you gonna start on? And these ones on this side are a little bit bigger. But it is the way, it's not my design, so I'm just following along with the way, corporate logos, whatever. Right. This one. You know, when you're cutting big long points like this, and the way I'm cutting this pattern out is, see how that line is there and then it's extended upward further? That is a safety for me as I'm cutting these tiny little finicky things, and I'm being so careful with the rest of my glass that I'm actually cutting the glass bigger than it needs to be. I can grind it down a little, but I know that the actual piece of glass will fit, and I've got room to work with it and reshape it a little bit. So sometimes I do cut stuff just a hair differently. It's kind of opposite of what I said about the rum burgundy thing, but that is a strategic reason, and that deviation is kind of a general rule of thumb in cutting my patterns out. And once again, the only reason is because we're talking about little tiny pieces smaller than my thumb. You know, we're not talking about a traditional stained glass window with larger pieces. Oops, that's going to get away from me. So we have 1, 2, 3. Alright, hold on a second. Got all these pattern pieces laying all over the place. I don't know what's what. I don't know what happened. It was on fire when I put it down. And that is definitely not one of them. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? Alright, I think I lost one somehow. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Okay. Don't think it's that. Okay. Let's get these traced on here. We'll get these cut out, and we will be done with the eagle. Well, I'm going to do the claws at the very, very end because that gives me a little bit of wiggle room, and they're just such tiny, finicky pieces that I'm going to save those and drop them in. I'll glue a whole bunch of this down to another piece of glass and clean it all up in stages before I continue on with the background. So we'll get all the main design and the main logo, we'll get it grinded and perfected and glued down. And then we'll go back in and start filling in all these tiny little finicky places systematically, because what I don't want, so there's a duality here. When you're doing a stained glass window, you really do want to cut all of your glass before you start building. And what I've found over the years is the only reason that is that is a quote that was said by somebody with an extremely small table. If you have a really complicated project, there's nothing wrong with doing a whole section, building it, setting it on another table, and then continuing on with the tedious work so that you can break it down into smaller chunks. I mean, it's just not that serious. I'm not making money. This is not production. I am not a CNC machine. There's still a confused ape behind this glass cutter at the end of the day, you know. So, you know, however you got to work it to make it manageable. It's like they say in archery, whatever works, right? So, anyways, let me get this traced on. Come in. You're sticking to the table. Do. Tracing, tracing, tracing. All right. As long as the wind don't kick up too bad, we'll be just fine. But until I get these pieces turned into glass, these little paper pattern pieces are prone to be all over the place. I think I've already lost one just in the process of cutting them. Chances are it's laying at my feet because I have a total of 7 feathers, but I seem to only have 6 pattern pieces. I don't know what's going on. But easy enough to replicate and reproduce. Not really an emergency. Did you guys know that if it wasn't for the stained glass industry, there would be no lead in production anywhere in America with the way they outlawed it, the way, you know, how you can't buy lead sinkers and lead anchors anymore for fishing and boating? The stained glass lobby forced Congress to make allowances for artistic endeavors and antiques and restoration type stuff because lead is so vital to the trade. So, shower thoughts. We get back to cutting and tracing here. The point is, the stained glass lobbyists in Washington, rightly so, in my belief, you guys may hold other opinions, is one of the big reasons why we still have access to lead and it's not completely 100% banned the way they wanted to. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, the 7th one. Okay. They're all here. I'm an idiot. Okay. We're good to go. There are 7 feathers, but one of them is just a tiny little fingernail size of a seed scrap. It's another one of those pieces. So, once again, got my pattern pieces drawn on the glass. Oh, there it is. Hard to see. All the way down and as straight as a line as I can get. So I'll cut this out. And so I'll have all of this to make any kind of mistakes I need to make with the lettering. So, now we are free to cut this out. Oops, see, it's got those dimples in there, man. Oof. Oh, they're glass cutter killers, man. That's like a year's worth of rolling off the edge, running into those little seed pocket thingy bobbers. You know, and a lot of times I like to use my pliers because my sweaty fingers will ruin the magic marker on the piece I'm cutting, and then I'll have to go and find the pattern piece and retrace it back on there. And so it's kind of nice if you could let that magic marker sit on the glass for a little bit. Right. Let's see. So, okay. The first one is done. There are 5 left. Let's separate that out. It's such a wide angle, I gotta use my pliers. Well, those little divots in the glass, man, they're just killing my cutter. Alright, we're rocking and rolling. Oh, and another big divot right on my line. I really don't. It's pretty glass, but it really is no fun to cut with. Alright, which one was that again? Okay, we're alright. I think I want to make that a little bit more curved than it is. That line looks a little too straight for me. So on this piece here, I cut it just a little bit. See the magic marker on the edge? I have left that much meat on there, and I'll make it fit precisely with the grinder because it's such a fine little point that I don't want to break it off just breaking it out of the larger piece of glass. So like I said, there are times where you will just decide to do it differently and, you know, throw the rule book out. But, you know, I've built hundreds and hundreds of windows, and I've been doing this for 25 years, so I kind of got a feel. You know, each glass and each manufacturer, they're all different. You know, they don't all cut the same. Some glass is really difficult to cut, and some glass can be almost too easy to cut. You know, so there's all different types of levels of hardness and brittleness and all that you consider, you know, when you're cutting. Okay, so now this one here is a pretty deep inside cut, and I'm not sure. We'll see if I can get it all the way out. But the opening is wide enough to be able to, probably can't see it through. So that's a pretty deep curve, and I've made a couple extra score lines to work my way into there. But it's open and wide enough that my little grinder head will fit along that line. So here's another piece of glass that's just technically a little too challenging to risk. And see, so when you go to break it out, and then it falls all over the place. And then you got pieces of glass like that on your floor. Welcome to my world. But we did manage to get that nice deep curve out of there. And we'll cut the backbone off of it. Leave a little bit of meat at the end to grind down. Cut an extra relief line. Now, we'll start pulling it apart. You have to be careful on these thin pieces. There we go. And yes, you can make yourself some really nice sharp weapons out of glass. Maybe we'll do a video about that, but I've got some top secret weapons that you can take through a metal detector. That's all I'm going to say about that. Alright, I'll say more. I have perfected making giant glass arrowheads that are absolutely lethal. So, that is a subject for another time. All right, 2 left. We got 2, and you know, did you guys notice that I was able to keep that feather in one piece? I was worried I was going to have that separated into 2 pieces because I thought it was going to break on me the way I was cutting it. And so that survived. And then we'll break these bones out of here. Okay. One more. I'm glad I cut these nice and big. They look kind of cool. So now that another reason to cut just outside the lines, because if you remember, we are going to go around all the edges of the glass with a grinder and do a final precise shaping. I have plenty of meat to work with, and the eagles and the feathers are part of the main design element. So if they are just a hair big, they really look big and bold and stand out. It'll be nice. Now, don't get me wrong. They're going to be grinded pretty close within the pattern size. But I won't get too hung up about it if they're a little bit large, because they look nice. Whoop, hit another pocket. So like I said, we got another deep cut. So I've made 2 score lines coming out of there. 1, so that was for, and this is why you have to have a lot of scraps. You know, you have to plan how you cut stuff out. Because I am working with some really ridiculously small pieces of glass and very small tolerances. And see, little long pieces like that, they can break just trying to separate them out from the mass, you know, to get your little detail. That's, you know, that's a sketchy piece. That feather is half the size of my finger, and it's actually one of the larger ones. So, and I'm feeling glass on the bottom of my fingers. They're getting, I think I got little micro pieces embedded into my paper. But we're pretty close to a vacuum and a cleanup. Today was going to be just these feathers. There we go. All right. Oh, they look nice. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is our progress so far. And when you look at it, you have to understand that is just the basic first rough cut. And like any other material that you work with, now I've got to sand them down, so to speak, with a diamond bit grinder and a little water trough. And I'll go around the edge of all this glass and make it fit really super precisely to that pattern. So we've got our wings, we've got the eagle done today, minus the claws. And the claws are literally, when I'm done and I get the main eagle together, I'll dig back in here. Look, I'll guarantee you that I can just pick one out of here on accident. Like, oh look, here's a claw. What a surprise. How about that? So when I'm done with everything, we'll make the claws. So for right now, this is what we have done today. We've got the eagle, got the cross, we've got the letters, and we've got our basketball ready to cut out. And but next, I think I'm going to do the nameplate out of this same gray black glass. But I'm going to wrap the studio up like a traditional old school stained glass studio guy. Friday's a cleanup day. And if you're all not Christian and you don't care, this is Easter weekend. This is Good Friday. I'm not Catholic, but I built a lot of Catholic windows, and I respect that. So I'm not going to work or do any labor or try to be famous on YouTube again until Monday. We'll let the Lord rest in his tomb for 3 days, and he'll come back on Sunday, and we can remember exactly why it matters. Because the deed is done. Satan has already failed. The end has been foretold from the beginning. So, praise the Lord, and happy Easter. I'm glad y'all were here. Thank you so much for all the kind comments. Thank you for all the likes and the subs. Come back on Monday, and we're going to get started into a different kind of cutting, because we're going to cut all these straight lines now in the background. And after we finish doing our grinding, it's going to get pretty crazy. Once we get up into about the 100th or 200th or 300th piece, it'll be a test in psychological awareness of how do you put a puzzle together when they're all the same shape. All right, guys, we'll see you Monday. Have a great weekend, and happy Easter, everybody.